Hello. Good to be here. I've been writing for Breitbart for about 13 years. Guns, Second Amendment. My days are like this. I write on guns and then I write on guns, then I drink a cup of coffee and write on guns. That's literally how my day goes. And yeah, for those of you clapping, I love it too because it's a way to defend freedom. But in those 13 years, I keep getting asked the same question in settings where I don't have time to expound on it. People will say, why does the left keep pushing gun control when it's evident that it's a failure? And I'll say, because they are ideologues. But I don't ever get to explain to them, how do you know what an ideologue is? And how do you defeat an ideologue? And that's why I was especially happy to be here tonight to talk to you, because it gives me a very few minutes to help you understand how you recognize an ideologue and how you defeat one. An ideologue presents himself or assumes that he is a savior, not of eternal souls, but of this temporal existence. Ideologues think they know best, and they pursue those best ideas through political means or, when necessary, through force. Russell Kirk, the great man of letters, one of my heroes, made clear that ideologues are so consumed with the superiority of their ideas, they will even sacrifice the lives of their people. In political talk, that means the lives of their constituents. They'll sacrifice them to see their vision secured. In the latter half of the 20th century, when Kirk was fighting for Western civilization, what had already happened? We had already seen men spend great energy to secure communism, Nazism, fascism. The end of all of these things were death. Death for innocent people, but they don't care. What would Hitler care? What would Mussolini care? What would any of these people care? And just like ideologues today, even when they see that the end of their vision is death, others blindly follow. In his book, Enemies of the Permanent Things, Kirk observed that ideologues promise us terrestrial paradise, but they take us to terrestrial hell. It's pretty smart. And here's what he noted. Now, you're going to see some irony in this. He noted that the trip from heaven to hell or paradise to hell is often covered or hidden with promises that this is scientific, right? Kirk pointed out that fascism, Nazism, and communism have all claimed to be scientific. It wasn't long ago we were hearing that, right? Trust the science. But you need to note this. This is important. Ideologue doesn't really mean it's scientific when he says it. He doesn't care. He's out for power. And he uses that just to control your psyche so that when you start going, wait, this really doesn't make sense, or maybe under the ideologue's plan, people are dying, and you go, wait, people are dying. He knows that you'll fall back on that and go, no, I can trust him, it's scientific. Or I can trust him, he said it's for the good of the people. That is how they work. It's how they come to power. In the 20th century, any of you who had exposure to Cold War studies from the 20th century, you understand when ideologues came to power, they did so under promises of hope. They used mantras like power to the people and all this other garbage that they didn't mean. That was just to keep the people at bay until they had their power solidified. And once they had their power, they could do whatever they want, and they could use force. Now, I want you to understand this. And I know when they introduced me, they said I have a PhD. It doesn't mean I'm smarter than anybody. It just means I studied this. When an ideologue comes to power, he will use force. If you don't believe that, you don't live in the real world. Mentally, you don't. He will use force, or he will at least use a show of force to try to scare you into submission. That's how it works. You have to know that. Now, why use force? Let me say this, and I hope you hear it. It's because the ideologue's vision runs contrary to nature. It runs contrary to reality. The late economist Milton Friedman, here's what he wrote. The use of force to achieve equality will destroy freedom and will end up in the hands of people who use it to promote their own interests. It's like turning a lion loose, all right? Now, I know you're thinking of people who fall under the criteria of ideologue as I'm talking. Let's jump to the 21st century. Because we have plenty of ideologues in power in the United States. How do I recognize them? What I've learned is one of the easiest ways is their blind adherence to gun control. And I say that for this reason. Gun control endangers the law-abiding citizen. That's not just a historical fact, it's an empirical fact. I can see it plainly, but they keep pushing it, and they keep holding to it. These ideologues couch their enlightened goals in words of sympathy and promises of the public good, even though the law-abiding suffer, and not only suffer, they die. Consider this. Illinois has a 72-hour waiting period for gun purchases. They have a licensing requirement for gun owners. It's a FOID card, Firearm Owner's Identification Card. You have to go through a big process with the state police to get that card before you can even legally own a gun. They have a red flag law. They have a gazillion other gun controls, and over 2,700 murders under Mayor Lori Lightfoot alone. Over 2,700. Now, when that figure came out, did the leaders go, uh-oh, the gun control's not working, we need to repeal it. We need to repeal it so these good people can exercise their Second Amendment? No, they didn't do that. Because their goal is not your safety. Their goal is not my safety. The goal of the ideologue is his power. That's his goal. And this is why the response in Illinois, the response to 2,700 plus deaths was more gun control. They passed an assault weapons ban and universal background checks. I'm going to say this. I hope if you take any note or remember anything I say, I hope you remember this. They act the way they act because ideologues are immune to proof of failure. Like I say, they don't believe their system works anyway. It's all a power grab. They're not looking at results. They don't care, and they don't care if you die. That's what Kirk was saying. When Kirk wrote about ideology, he described it as intellectual servitude. In other words, it's a form of slavery. But there is a means of escape. And this is where we transition from what an ideologue is to how we can get away from this ideologue, how we can begin to defeat the ideologue. The means of escape, it's very much like some of the things I heard Tulsi say. The means of escape entails a return to the objective, a return to understanding that our rights come from the God of nature, and they come to us and are evident in the laws of nature. We have to understand that my rights come from God through nature. Sometime when you say that, you'll see people kind of draw back, but all I'm doing is really referencing Thomas Jefferson, who I'll get to in just a second. The source of our liberty, understand this, the source of our liberty and our natural rights transcends, that's very important, but also supersedes, which may be more important, transcends and supersedes any political apparatus or ideological gibberish. See, when you understand this, when I used to teach at university, I always hoped those kids could understand they were created to be free. If you can understand that, you can beat the ideologue. Let me say it this way. Our path to the high ground, where ideologues hold no sway, our path there begins with a return to those simple words Thomas Jefferson wrote centuries ago. He wrote, "We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights." We all know that line. What that one line tells me is that my rights are not mine by dictate of an ideologue or the majority vote of a political body, nor are yours. They are ours because our Creator wove them into the very fiber of our being. This is basic stuff. They're just not teaching it. They're scared to death to teach it. These rights, which include life and the ability to defend life, are essential to our humanity and our freedom. You're not truly human if you don't have the ability to defend your life. You're really not. You're losing some of your humanity. These rights existed before the Second Amendment was written, and if somebody manages to do away with it, guess what? They still exist. That's just how it is. Because their source transcends and supersedes the ideologue and a political body. So I just say this to close. The ideologue can hiss and scream. I'm sure he will. But it does not change the reality that our rights come from a source above earthly government and beyond the purview of revolutionary persons. Doesn't change that. And we've got to understand this, and we've got to teach it to people, because understanding this is foundational to the health of our republic. Thank you.